All right. Okay. Can you hear me? Testing. Hello. 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 Testing. 2, 3. Can you hear me? Hello. All right. Hey. All right. Hey, I'm gonna before we get started today. By the way, I want to just do a couple of announcements. If you're a giver, thank you for giving. Continue to give. We're no longer passing baskets, but there is a basket in the back. If you have paper that you want to give, then by all means drop that in there. Otherwise, hey, just a few announcements. Number one is we do have a women's night coming up on Friday. Isn't it Friday? Yes, ladies gathering. It is Friday, June 3rd at 7 p.m. It'll be fun and a growing experience. Youth ministry, we will be meeting again this Wednesday. I think Melaine will be back in the saddle. And then I wanted to mention as well that we're sending as many youth as we can to camp. The cost right now is $399. That's scholarshiped already. But the more money that we can bring in, the cheaper it gets for families like mine who have 3 kids going to camp, which is rather expensive. So one of the things that I would like you to do is be open to giving them money. So what that looks like right now is we have a cafe downstairs. So after service, you want to slide down there and get, Italian soda, a latte, iced cold, a frappe, you name it. They will make it for you, and then you can give them a little cash or make an online payment to them, and that will all go towards scholarshiping. So that would be great. And then I think I've heard that there's going to be Brown Bear car wash booklets, which I think are really helpful because it's nice to wash your car. So all that stuff is in process, and you'll get to it soon. But the camp dates are August 8th through the 12th, so that's coming up at the end of the summer. All right, I think that's all that I have for announcements today, except that in a couple of weeks, which that is going to be June, there it is, June 12th. We're going to do an outdoor service and barbecue, so we have an outdoor amphitheater that we built during COVID, so we keep meeting. And so we're going to meet out there, weather permitting, and then we're just going to follow up with a barbecue. Please bring a side. It's going to be a picnic theme, so whatever you want to bring would be lovely. Awesome. Hey, so we're going to get started today, but I wanted to take some time to talk with Steve and Ann, and they're going to just come up and share a little bit about what they're going through, the good and the bad. And are you guys ready? All right, come on up. Steve and Ann Mall, ladies and gentlemen.
It's all good.
It's all good. All right. Oh, let me turn it back on. I turned it off.
Morning, folks. We're a couple of the older folks in the crowd here. There's only 2 other people who have been in this building longer than the 2 of us, and they're sitting back there. Hi, guys. Say hello to the Dows. You'll have to excuse me. I'm a little bit shaky this morning. We've been wanting to do this for a couple of weeks, but then Jake got sick a couple of weeks ago, and Dave stepped in at Easter, and then last week Ann was gone, and I can't do this without both my rocks, okay? My one rock is represented by the wall back there and what that cross stands for, and the other one of 35 years on June 20th is the reason I'm able to stand up here and not fall over. So, because she's been holding me up for a long time, especially most recently. But I am shaky. I just got off the plane last evening from Wisconsin. I made a quick trip there to bury my buddy of 63 years, Chief Petty Officer James Anthony Lipsky, Navy retired. And I had the privilege of going there and standing alongside his siblings. And it was good. It was a celebration, but it was tough. And I knew we were going to do this today, and I figured, how am I going to do this and keep my mind on it? And I wrote down a bunch of stuff on the plane coming back yesterday because I hadn't had a chance to really think about it. And then I got up early this morning thinking, okay, I got to pare this thing down. I got to write some notes. Jake's going to want to get the hook out and pull me off the stage. But in John 16, verse 24, he says, Jesus says, until now you've asked for nothing in my name. Ask and you shall receive, and your joy will be complete. So I'm hoping Jake won't pull me off the stage. And then I said, well, I can't read from notes. But I thought, geez, Jake has notes. And about almost 14 months ago, I was laying in the hospital having just about died from loss of blood. And I watched a broadcast of our church service, and there was a lady who got up here and read from her notes. And she's a lady who every time she walks in this room, the room lights up with her smile. And I figured if Hannah can read from her notes, I can read from mine. So thank you, Hannah. I also want to thank Hannah for helping save my life, because I was stuck there in the hospital by myself during COVID, having almost died, and nobody could come and visit me. So there was one of God's answered prayer, Hannah being so sharing in how God had worked in her life at a time when I really needed to hear that and know he was there for me. So here we are. And I'm going to diverge on a couple of other things. Hopefully yesterday was something else or something special in your life. It was Armed Forces Day, and hopefully you took time to thank those people whose families are giving up time with their loved ones while they serve. And but a lot of people also didn't know it was another anniversary, and an anniversary that really touched my life. We talk about praying and asking God for things, which almost seems contradictory, since God knows everything we need. He knows from the get-go what our needs are going to be. And on Armed Forces Day of 1961, 61 years ago, I happened to be standing at a bus depot in Montgomery, Alabama. And a bus rolled in, and on that bus were the Freedom Riders. And I saw a man's inhumanity to man. I watched people beaten to the ground, and I met a very special man by the name of John Lewis, who at the time was 21 years old and was one of those on that bus. And I also met Reverend Ralph Abernathy, who was standing by Martin Luther King's side when he was assassinated. And so as I think back on what has God done in my life, and has he answered my prayers, he's answered my prayers beyond even my wildest imagination in waking me up to my responsibility to my fellow man. There's also something else that wakes me up to my responsibility, and there's two books I carry around with me all the time. One is the Bible, and the other one's a little story. It's called The Diary of Anne Frank. And another lesson in man's inhumanity to man, but it's another blessing from God, because he reminds me of what can happen if we don't pray for our country and we don't pray for the world. I happened to be coming out of the airport last night, and here's one of the latest issues of Life magazine. And so if you have time to pick that up, you can use that as a way to remind you of what can happen, what is happening. If you just look at the Middle East right now, or the Eastern Europe, I should say, and what's going on over there, and what is clearly stirring in this country right now. So pray for your country. Pray for what little you can do when the time comes to vote. And, do what you can to keep that thing from happening again, okay, please? So down to what we originally had planned on talking about. And Ann and I have both looked this over, and she agreed to let me do most of the speaking. So last fall, I had some suspicious blood work, and my doctor said, maybe we need to do something about it. Let's get some biopsies. And I immediately went into distrust mode and anxiety mode, and I pushed it away, and finally I knew I was going to have to make a decision, so I went to my primary doctor who'd been taking care of me for 20 years, and I said, what should I do? And she says, get the biopsies, that story about God sending you, the man on the rooftop and the water's rising, and he sends a truck to rescue, and the person says, no, God will save me. The next one is the water's rising and a boat comes by, and they say, no, God's going to save me. And finally a helicopter comes by, and no, God's going to save me. And then finally the voice from heaven says, excuse me, I sent you a truck, I sent you a boat, and I sent you a helicopter. How many more things do I have to send you before you pay attention? So I guess I was supposed to pay attention and get the biopsies. And so I did. It was 3 days before Christmas that I had them done, and already people were praying for me, and God was answering my prayer, because I came home from getting my biopsies, and there was a Christmas letter from an old friend who says, oh, by the way, I'm being treated for this condition, and this is the treatment I'm getting. And so immediately I call Ron and I say, what the heck's going on? Tell me about your story and your journey. And so, God wasn't going to wait for the biopsy results to come back. He knew. And 3 days after Christmas, or 3 days before Christmas, I did have the biopsies done. Our anxiety was high even without the results. And we asked others to pray for peace while we waited for the results. And, I started hearing from other people who were going through the same journey I was going through. I already knew two very close people in my life who had been through it, but they'd only had one form of treatment. And so these people that had similar journeys were all telling me about these different options I had. And, each person had a different story, but the more information Ann and I got, and we talked back and forth about it, the peace came over us. The weight was lifted, the calmness was there. And that's what we needed in order to be able to make a decision. You can't make decisions when your anxiety level's way up here. So, we were very faithful in praying, and I don't know how many different Bible studies we found on dealing with fear, dealing with anxiety, dealing with cancer and that particular news, how to deal, what God's healing was all about. And so we just kept asking God for discernment, and the more we were fed information, the more we found we had the tools. So then came the news, and yes, the biopsy showed cancer, and yes, there are treatments, and yes, it's slow growing, so you have time to consider the options. Those options are to treat or not to treat. And if you treat, you got surgery, you got radiation, you got different forms of hormone and drug therapy, and I'm thinking, yikes, what do I do? So best thing for us is to go to a happy place. And our happy place was the slopes of Whistler, British Columbia. And we were fortunate enough to have a very special friend join us for a few days on that trip. And, we just continued to get more and more opinions. And, but the more opinions we got, we also hear, we're doing a lot of reading, and it says, okay, get more lab tests, get more opinions, go see another doctor here and another doctor there, and our heads are swimming. And we're trying to figure out how to navigate this system. But instead of wallowing in anxiety and, worrying about or running into doors that are closed to us, which seemed like what we could expect, given the fact that we're dealing with different healthcare networks and different doctors and different networks, doors were just flung open. You go to somebody and you say, okay, can I have a referral to go see this person? And you think it's going to fall out, it's going to fall right in your face. They're going to say, no, you can't go here, you can't go there because you're not part of this, you're not part of that. Instead, it was like referrals falling out of the sky, like the leaflets we dropped over Europe during World War II. And then, my friend who went skiing with us up at Whistler says, oh, by the way, I have a neighbor who just happens to be a specialist in this field. Why don't you let me introduce you to him? Well, the neighbor not only happens to be a specialist in the field, he happens to be the top in the area. And not only that, but he oversees all of the other people who do this. And it's like, wait a minute, God, this is just something more than amazing. And then when you have doctors who have one specialty who say, no, my specialty's not for you, you need to see this other one, and I know him, and I know he's going to take good care of you. And suddenly you're getting all of this validation. And our support network got bigger and bigger. One specialist gave me 3 of his former patients who are fighter pilots. Well, I'm a retired Air Force nurse. And if anybody knows fighter pilots, it's me. And those fighter pilots don't get into the cockpit before they know what's happening on the ground, what's going to happen in the plane, and what's going to happen in the sky, and what's going to happen after we come back down. So when they tell you something, you know it's been over-researched. And when you got 3 of them all saying the same thing, you think, okay, this is a God thing, because people don't get to benefit from that kind of input without some divine intervention. And not only was I given their names, but they contacted me before I contacted them. And so we finally said, okay, it's time to make a decision, and what option we needed to prove or to pursue. So we asked for more prayer, and we went off to another happy place to consider this, and we went off to Lake Chelan, spent some time with a few friends, walked in the sun, read, studied, and on about day 4 or 5 of the week we were there, the aha moment came. And we were able to just, say, okay, this is it. And even before we left there, that particular specialist that my friend referred me to called us and checked in on us and said, Steve, we've reviewed your slides. We got your slides. We looked at them ourselves, so we know what's what, and I still think this is the best option for you. So we've made our choice, and the treatment process starts on May 31st. I asked for continued prayer, and the other thing that I'd like to share with you is that, if you're looking for validation, don't be surprised if God gives you a little chuckle along the way. Because once we made the decision, did anybody here watch the Kentucky Derby this year? You got any race fans? Okay. I don't know if you remember, but there was a horse that came in 18th place. His name was Cyberknife. And that's the treatment that I'm going to receive. The owner of the horse had the same treatment that I'm going to receive, and it was so successful, he spent a few $1 million on a horse and named it after the treatment. So, God's got a great sense of humor and a great way of validating. So I just want to ask you folks to continue to pray and praise God for the way he answers prayer. I know Jake's getting restless in his seat there, but I want to see if Ann has anything that she wants to put on top of this, and then we'll let Jake do his thing.
I do. I think because Steve and I are both retired nurses, we have that medical background, and sometimes that can be a blessing and sometimes not so much. And so when we got the information, it was verified that it was cancer, my mind went right into medical mode. Let's get this taken care of. Get it done. Get it done. And God has taught me peace and patience through this, and just a heavy reliance on him is absolutely crucial. At least it has been for us. And if you think about praying for God's help, I would encourage you to pray with an open mind. I personally wanted it. I wanted a fix, like right here and now. And yet God showed me that there was going to be a process to this, and that he had us every single step of the way. Many of you were praying for us. We've had prayer from all over the world. And in that process, instead of asking God for an instant fix, what we started praying for was peace, like Steve said, wisdom and discernment in the process. And we didn't know what that was going to look like, but what it turned out to be was a deluge of blessings in the form of getting the referrals that needed to be made were okayed. Senior moment there. Yeah, the information that we were given to read, and then, like Steve said, the specialist. And no one was pushing any one particular treatment. They were all very honest and upfront, and the team that we have available to us has been just fabulous. And it wasn't until for me, that I started praying for wisdom and discernment through this process that peace came. And so God answers prayers, sometimes not the way we think they're going to get answered, but he does answer them. And for us, he has just blessed us with what we asked for, wisdom and discernment, that we were given every single step of the way. So please, when you pray to God, think about this. What is it that it might not be an instant fix, but he's going to walk with you every step of the way. So.
Don't leave just yet.
And the horse finished the race.
Yeah. Well, these guys are really special to our church, and if you want the next 15 minutes or 13 minutes, you may as well close it out. No, I'm just kidding. These guys are super special, and so to hear their story, that's a sermon. These guys have lived it, and you've lived it, and that's super. We honor that, right? Hey, I wanted to bring up one other thing too. Kathy Dow, her mother passed away. Was it Thursday? Yesterday. We've got people in our congregation that need prayer. Other people in our family. In our church whose families are struggling through cancer and things like that. So wouldn't it be good for us just to take some time and to pray to Abba Father, who does care about us and walking us through these things. So, Lord, first of all, we lift up Steve and Ann, and thank you for their testimony. Thank you for their light. Thank you for their generosity. Thank you for their presence as a mother, a father, as a grandmother, and a grandfather of this church. We thank you for them. Lord, that you've heard our prayers, that you've given them peace, that you've given them direction. And now we pray, Lord, that the culmination of all that you've done would be now accomplished in this next season in which the treatment actually starts. We pray continued peace. The Dows, Lord, and Kathy and her family, as they're mourning and grieving the loss of their mother, we pray that your peace would be there. Dealing with cancer within their family, Lord, we do pray again of your shalom, of your well-being in the middle of our struggles, in the middle of our crisis. Thank you for the wisdom that was shared here today, where we recognize we don't need the immediate answer that we want, but we certainly need you, and we need you to guide us through life circumstances. You haven't promised always to take us out of life circumstances, but you've promised a way through, and so we lean on that. We don't lean on our own understanding, but we acknowledge you in all of our ways. Thanks, Lord. All these things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Discharged from the hospital.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's great. So we prayed for a daughter, or Rosemary's granddaughter, who was airlifted from Guam to Hawaii, and she's made it. She survived. That's still on. Okay.
Woo, okay. Hey, so glad to be with you today. I'm going to give you a quick little synopsis of my sermon. So, no, seriously, that was right on time. I thought that was really great. Hey, so we've been talking about the kingdom, the power, and the glory as a little phrase at the end of the Lord's Prayer, and it's such a great phrase of understanding a theology of what God's kingdom is about. And I wanted to just jump into something that I think is most relevant, I think, to where we're at right now as a culture. Every conversation, it seems, when it comes to justice and when it comes to the idea of what is just, comes down to the conversation about power. And so we've got lots of teachers in the rooms, and so I'm privy to a lot of the conversations that they have. And there's one teacher that I know was in a conversation recently about redistributing power away from white men who typically, within the context of our culture, have traditionally held that kind of power. And the idea of how do we sort of redistribute power so that more people have power, and then not one class or one gender has all of the power. And so the conversation ended up going towards STEM. We need to encourage girls, we need to encourage ethnic minorities into the fields of science and technology, so that they can get more power. And I sympathize with that idea. It's a great idea. How do we create genuine equal opportunity across the board? I think I'm all in favor of equal opportunity. I think we all are. The question becomes, and the problem becomes, when we talk about power and we don't really understand what we're talking about. Because in Western civilization, going all the way back to the Greeks, the way in which we've dealt with power is not the way that God would have us deal with power. And it's not the sort of experience that would lead to the well-being or the flourishing of human society. Jesus has a great teaching on this. We're going to jump into it really quickly in just a bit. But here's what a quick synopsis. Our idea of power, and I've got a triangle image right here, is a sort of hierarchy, and I know that's a small font right there, but in this idea, like those at the top of the pyramid have high authority, they have low accountability. That is, they don't have to answer to very many people, right? So when you're on the top of the pyramid, you get to be your own boss. You get to set your own schedule. you are not accountable to a lot of people. And then you have high esteem because everybody wants to be there and everybody looks up to you. You get high pay. So this is the way that we've thought about power for a really long time and the way that we use power. Those on the bottom of the hierarchy pyramid have low authority. That is, they don't get to make many of their own decisions. I was just talking about how I used to work in a book publishing warehouse, and basically I picked stickers off of books all day long, you know. I had no decision-making power at all. And I had high accountability. That is, I was answerable to pretty much everybody in the whole organization. Everybody could boss me around and tell me what to do. Like, I need somebody to unclog the toilet. Okay, book sticker guy, that's you, right? So high accountability, low esteem because I'm cleaning out the girl's toilet. And low pay. So this is the way that we've sort of organized or understood power within the context of culture in the past. Now, here's the problem with the idea of redistributing power as the way to make society more just, okay? If you take one gender and one race out of power and insert another race or another gender in power, but you don't deal with the heart of humankind and the way that we think and exhibit power, you're going to get the same results that you had before, injustice. That is, a system that doesn't give reward based on effort and talent. Now, there are some people in our culture that would say, well, let's do away with the hierarchy and let's just make a flat line, okay? Everybody has the same authority, the same power, the same earning potential, or the same earning. It's just flat. Everybody's the same. And that would be a just society. But my question to you is that really, and youth, you got to listen to this because you hear this a lot in your school. Is that really just? If everybody makes the same, everybody has the same power, everybody has the same outcomes, I would suggest you that's not just. Let me just give you a quick example. When I was in graduate school, and I have a master's in education, one of the assignments they had me do was to create an artistic metaphor to describe the teaching learning process. So I spent about 5 hours, maybe more. I made this elaborate series of letters between a teacher and a student. And what I called this particular metaphor was a dialogue. There's something about the learning process which is a dialogue, which is why God doesn't always answer our prayers, because He wants to teach us stuff through the process. There's a dialogue associated in prayer, and so that was my thing. Is like, so these corresponding letters, and I showed how the student learned and the teacher was able to exhibit a healthy way to teach, okay? Another lady, she took like 12 eggs and she dyed them a bunch of different colors. Then she shelled all the eggs and cracked them, and then she made little mosaic pieces and did a beautiful schoolhouse out of eggshells. She pasted them all together, put it in a framed box. I mean, she must have spent like 40 hours. It was nuts. It was really cool, but like maybe a waste. It was nuts. It was awesome. And then this other dude, and he was kind of a meathead, and I didn't expect to meet any meatheads in my graduate program in education. He shows up, and his hair's a little tousled, and he has his bedside reading lamp with him, and he goes and he plugs it in, and he says, let me explain the mosaic. So she creates a schoolhouse, and she says, hey, we're such a racially diverse culture, and there's so many ethnicities represented in American society, and the education system can be a way in which we integrate lots of different people, lots of different understandings into a community that's really beautiful and honoring to one another. And that was great, right? And then this meathead shows up. He plugs his lamp in. And he's like, this is like the education system. Like, there's information that flows through the cord. It may be through textbooks or books or something, or maybe it's a lecture, and then it flows up, and then the teacher, you're like this little knob, and you turn it, and the student is the flashlight, and when they get it, it's like, bing, learning, right? So that was his thing. So we all compared the grades that we got afterwards, because this was, I don't know why, but we all did, and I got an A, the egg lady got an A, and meathead got an A. Now let me ask you, is that just? Is that just? That is, I would suggest to you, that is not just. Justice means that you get a fair treatment for, you get what you deserve. That's what justice is. So justice has to be both punitive as well as rewarding. For someone who takes the life of another, it would be unjust to let them free. Justice demands that they get a reward, in this case, a negative reward for what they've done. And so a flat line is not justice. Socialism, communism will not create justice. It will only create more injustice at times. So the problem is not the hierarchy. The problem is what we do with the power that we're given. How do we wield the power that we've been given? And so hierarchies in themselves, again, are not bad necessarily, but they can be built bad. And they do always become bad when the hierarchy is rigged in such a way that certain people get a reward who don't deserve it, or some people don't get a reward that do deserve it. So Jesus had some really strong things to say about this, but so did Reverend Martin Luther King. And by the way, whenever you quote Reverend Martin Luther King, make sure that you throw the Reverend part in there. I've noticed that that's disappearing from textbooks and websites and stuff like that. Reverend Martin Luther King got his understanding and his worldview and his idea of justice from the scriptures, okay? Not from something else, okay? So this is what he said. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by what? But by the content of their character. In other words, it's not all like this. There is still going to be a hierarchy, but the hierarchy with which you should have power or trust someone or empower someone should be based on not their race, not their ethnic background, not maybe a bunch of other weird decisions, but on the decisions that they make that have to do with their character, with their goodness, with their kindness. For Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther, that would have been the fruit of the Spirit, okay? This is the content of their character. How much do they exhibit these? Then you should trust them. Then you should promote them. Then they should be at the top of the pyramid. Jesus, this was critical for Jesus' teaching. And I want to walk you through a couple of his teachings, or maybe just one, because we don't have a lot of time, that really speaks to this. So Matthew chapter 20, starting in verse 20, says this. It should be on your screen. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down asked him for a favor. So that's Mama Zebedee was the mom of James and John, okay? And so she kneels down in front of Jesus and says, and Jesus says, what is it that you want? She said, grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right and the other sit at the left in your kingdom. So in a kingdom, in a monarchy, the people that sit at the right hand and the left hand of a king are ultimately those that get to carry out the will of the king. So that's pretty much the top of the pyramid as you can get, because you're only accountable to one person, whereas thousands, perhaps millions of people are going to be accountable to what you say and do. Again, they're trying. Mama Zebedee, who's a little bit of a tiger mom, is trying to put her children like at the top of the ladder, at the top of the pyramid. Jesus says this, you don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink from the cup that I'm going to drink? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. So Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem in the context of this scripture. And Mama Zebedee thinks that she is going to get a space for her children as Jesus steps into his kingship, literally within days, she believes. And Jesus answers, you don't know what you're talking about. When it comes to power, and when it comes to the way that power ought to be distributed, the way that power ought to work, you don't know what you're talking about. Plus, you don't know how I operate in power. Because what Mama Zebedee was effectively trying to do, and she didn't even know it, was to sign up James and John to be on the cross next to Jesus. Because we know the story. Jesus is crucified in the center when he comes into his power, ultimately. And James and John are not on the cross to the right and left, but a couple of common criminals. And so, sometimes we have to be careful what we ask for. Mama Zebedee would later learn this. And Jesus says, okay, you will indeed drink from the cup that I drank of. And what Jesus was doing is he was foreshadowing both James and John's death. James was beheaded in Jerusalem a number of years after Jesus rose, ascended into heaven, and left. Now, John, we believe, probably died of old age on the island of Patmos or somewhere around there. But we also, most historians believe that he was also boiled alive in hot oil, but survived. Okay? So there is the real sense that these two fellows were to taste, that is, the drink of the cup that Jesus drank from. Okay, so they were to experience that which Jesus experienced as well. Verse 24. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. So the other 10 apostles are super angry because these brothers have tried to set themselves over the other ones, like to sort of do an end round. Verse 25, Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. So Jesus is referring back to this hierarchy. I think my wife is going to get me water. Is that true? You're so good. I love that. Jesus is referring back to this triangular hierarchy, and he's saying something that the NIV translation doesn't really capture. So I'm going to read to you from the Message, and it says, Jesus would say this: "You've observed how godless rulers throw their weight around, how quickly a little power goes to their heads. It's not to be that way with you." In other words, there's something about the hierarchy, something about power that we understand, or at least the godless Gentiles, of which we are, okay, have dealt with and understood power. All right, I hope that fixes it. In which when you get authority, when you get power, it's a way for you to feel as if you're blessed, like you have the good life. You've arrived. You begin to enjoy the envy, the affirmation from everybody below you on the pyramid, because you're on the top and they're all accountable to you. You see them scurry about, and for some people that makes them really happy to have that kind of power. Some people just love all these people, like wishing they were as beautiful or strong as you are, right? And so there's all of this that's going on, and Jesus is like, this is not the way it is. This is not how it should be for you. By the way, Jesus does a lot of teaching, and I think this is the only time where Jesus calls a time out and says, whoa. Let's huddle up, because this is not the way you need to look at things, okay? So he addresses this head on. You ever had one of those moments with your children, like, oh, whoa, time out. Let's huddle up. We're not talking that way. So this is what Jesus is doing. And so he's saying, listen, we can't think about power. We can't think about it that way if we are going to have justice and fairness. Look what's happened already. Two brothers make a move to ascend up the ladder. What's it caused? Jealousy and fracturing and disunity within this group of apostles that Jesus is raising up to go start a movement after he leaves called the church. And just this introduction of Gentile-like power, that is, the power that puffs up, that throws its weight around, has caused such a fracturing that Jesus' church that he's about to leave is in great peril. So he stops the thing and he says, we can't think this way. Instead, he continues, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. So Jesus says, look, here's how power operates. Power that creates the good life, because you think that way, the Gentiles think that way, that when you have the most power, then you have the good life. That's not how it works. Good power creates real justice on earth, and it brings about a cycle of mutual care, mutual respect, and mutual submission. Let me show you another image of an inverted triangle. Okay. So in this context that Jesus is talking about, you have the person on the bottom, who is the person with the most authority, the person at the bottom of the pyramid, now becomes the person who inverts the hierarchy. So he has high authority, or she has high authority, high accountability. Hopefully they have good esteem, and we'll see an example of how Jesus had good esteem here. Typically they'll still probably make more. But notice what is at the heart of what they're doing. They're caring for those people who are above. They're not looking down for affirmation from those below them, but instead they're pushing up. They're throwing, this leader is throwing their weight, is building each other up. He's not surrendering authority, but she is in fact sharing power with them. In fact, this is the model that Jesus says, when you live the good life, when you know that you are operating correctly in power, and when you have arrived, is when you're down here and you are giving love and esteem and looking for the best interest of those who are above you. Again, those at the top of the pyramid still have low authority, still have high accountability, but typically their esteem isn't so low. They have a higher esteem now. Typically their pay isn't, they'll pay you as little as possible, but the person then who is at the bottom of the pyramid now is hoping to raise up the pay of those who are at the top because they care about their well-being, right? So in verse 28, Jesus says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus demonstrates this sort of inverted pyramid hierarchy through his own very life. He who had absolute power decided to surrender that power, not to lord it over or to push people around or to throw his weight around, but instead used his power to serve, to build up, to make those who were underneath him in terms of authority better. And so Jesus demonstrates that for us in that he died for us. Okay, really quickly, John chapter 13. Here's how he does it in real life, demonstrating, not just in teaching here. The evening meal was in progress, John 13:2. And the devil was ready, had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. So what does Jesus know at this point? Jesus knows that he has all power. Okay, so we talk about an all-powerful being. The scriptures tell us that Jesus knew at this moment that he had absolute power. And the question, of course, is, if you had absolute power, what would you do today? Would you go build a mansion? Would you go, buy your own island and, set up, I don't know. Would you go, I would go to the Alps maybe. I love the Alps. They're beautiful, man, especially probably with wildflowers this time of year. Would you go to the beach and drink Mai Tais and, I don't know, swim around and see the fishies? If you had absolute power, what would you do? So Jesus knows at this point he has absolute power. Let's look what he does. He also knew that he had come from God and was returning to God. There is that sense of high esteem. He knew who he was. So out of a sense of power, out of a sense of knowledge of who he was, here's what he does. This is fascinating because I don't know anybody else who would do this. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that it was wrapped around him. So Jesus has all power. And then he comes to Simon, who says, Lord, are you going to wash me too? And Jesus says, you don't realize what I'm doing, but later you'll understand. And Peter says, no. And Jesus says, unless I wash you, you've no part of me. This is summary. And then the Lord, Peter says, then just wash my whole body. And Jesus said, you don't need it. You've already clean. But there's one that's going to betray me, Judas, and he is not clean. Verse 12, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. And he said this, do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. And to which I don't think they knew. I think they probably were like, I just know that you washed the camel poop from between my toes, but I don't understand why or the significance of what this means. And so Jesus said, you call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Pause. Jesus does not say, hey, there's no hierarchy. We're all the same. Even Stevens, all the way around. Jesus says, there's a hierarchy, and I am your rabbi, I'm your teacher. I'm also your Lord. I'm also your master. I stand at the bottom of a pyramid in which I have maybe more talent, I have more learning, I've got more understanding, I've got more of all of it than you do. In fact, I have absolute power right now at my disposal. I've got it all. There is no equal playing field, let me just tell you. So Jesus doesn't diminish or go away or try to cancel out the hierarchy. He says, I stand at the top of it, or the bottom of it in Jesus' perspective. And here's what I am doing for you. And this is what I want you to do and this is what I want you to mimic. This is what I want you to copy as you're my disciples. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do this as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed. You will be blessed if you do them. Who has the good life? Who has the blessed life? Is it the one who stands at the top of the pyramid, who has low accountability, a lot of authority, a lot of power? And Jesus wouldn't say so. Jesus would say, if you really want to create justice, if you really want to create human flourishing in a family, in a neighborhood, in a marriage, in a workplace, in a government, the way that you do that is that you take power and you set it aside, or rather you use it in order to build people up, to ransom other people, to care for one another. Now that doesn't mean that you're not still powerful, that you have more authority. You don't abdicate your authority, parents, to children as you serve them. You don't. You still are in charge, and you say, you will do the dishes. And I will help you because I love you. You do your homework, and I will help you if I can. You tell people what to do, but your heart is that you want them to succeed, not just to see them scramble. Do you hear what I'm saying? This is the heart of what Jesus was saying about power. So who's blessed? Says Jesus. Jesus says that you're blessed not when you're in the top of the hierarchy, but when you're at the bottom, in which you're exercising your authority and your power to bless other people. Also, the question would be, how are you wielding power? And so I'm going to have my son Henry come up here as a closing illustration, okay? He's not excited about this, but all right. I have with me a sword. You recognize it. This is real steel. Can you touch this blade? Tell me if it's real. Okay. Can you feel that? Okay. So this is my sword, and I could wield it in a couple of ways, right? Traditionally, the sword has been used in order to hurt people often, right? To wield my way or the highway. People have taken kingdoms via sword. That's usually how they're begotten, right? That's how you establish your government, through the use of force, through the use of a blade. But there are times when this blade can also be used not to exercise the power of the one that yields it, but for one to be able to lift up and to benefit and to share power with someone beneath it. So, Henry, I want you to kneel down. Henry's turning 16 tomorrow, okay? So he's entering into manhood. Yep. And so, Henry, I'm going to use this not to behead you, but to benight you in your sense of manhood. And I want you to use your power in a way that would affirm and build up and create well-being all of your life within the context of your family, whatever you do for a career, whatever you do in your life in government, when you become the president of the United States. I want you to wield your power in such a way that you are not muscling other people out, but that you are affirming, caring, sharing, and giving your best to others. Do you accept this? Okay, great. Hey, great. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Anyway, all right. You get the point. Power can be used. You get the point. Power can be used in a couple of ways. It can be used to hurt and to lord it over someone and to run through it. Or it can be used to build up and to affirm and to strengthen and to give courage and to create well-being within the context of a society, a family, a culture, a neighborhood. Let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you for this teaching. I do pray, Lord, that we would not just hear what you have to say. We would not just receive that which you've done for us, for when you died for us, you did in fact give up your life and gave up your power to save us, to ransom us. And so, Lord, help us as your disciples, as we recognize, Father, that you are so high above us in every single way. Lord, help us to follow you within this context of the little power that we have. Help us to use it, Lord, in a way that would be honoring to the people around us and honoring to you. In the name of Jesus, amen. All right, you guys have a great Sunday. Please, if you got some time, stop by the cafe. Youth, you guys can go make some lattes and stuff. Sound good? All right, we'll see you next week.